The town of Brookhaven carried the kind of silence that felt safe on the surface but heavy underneath, like a secret no one dared to speak. Its streets were lined with faded brick storefronts and aging oak trees, and everyone knew the sheriff by name. Respect, order, and a certain unspoken fear stitched the town together. Officer Claire Donovan was the kind of woman people trusted instantly. At 34, she wore her uniform with the precision of someone who needed control. The neat bun, the polished badge, the voice that carried authority. To the town, she was the steady hand in a world that threatened to unravel. To herself, she was a woman grasping at fragments of purpose, hiding the bruises of a failed marriage and the long nights of solitude that followed. On a summer evening, at the county's annual fundraiser, Claire stood by the raffle booth, her posture immaculate, her smile professional. The sheriff, Tom Hale, had organized the event as he did every year. Children ran between picnic tables and country music spilled from the speakers. It was ordinary, safe, the kind of night that promised no surprises. And yet, it was that night Claire first noticed him. Ryan Hale, the sheriff's only son, moved through the crowd with a restless energy. 17, tall for his age but still carrying the awkward edges of adolescence, he seemed both present and apart, like he didn't quite fit in his own skin. His dark hair fell into his eyes as he carried boxes of supplies, helping his father with quiet obedience. When their eyes met, it was nothing. A flicker, a passing glance. But something in it lingered. Ryan's gaze held a mix of admiration and curiosity, and for reasons Claire couldn't explain, she didn't look away as quickly as she should have. She busied herself, pretending to adjust papers on the table. But when she looked again, he was still there, watching from across the lawn. The sound of Sheriff Hale's booming voice broke the moment. "Claire, fine job tonight. We couldn't run half of this without you." She turned, forcing her professional smile. "Happy to help, Sheriff. It's good for the community." "Good for you too," he added with a chuckle, then clapped her shoulder before moving on. His presence carried the weight of command, a man whose word was law in Brookhaven. When Claire turned back, Ryan was gone. Later that evening, as the fundraiser wound down, Claire walked toward her car parked near the dimly lit lot behind the town hall. The air smelled faintly of barbecue smoke and cut grass. She paused when she saw someone sitting on the curb near her cruiser. Ryan. "Evening, Officer Donovan," he said, his tone polite, almost shy. She hesitated. "Ryan, shouldn't you be helping your father pack up?" "I finished. Just needed some air." He gave a small smile. "You're different than I thought a cop would be." She raised a brow, instinctively defensive. "Different how?" "Not scary," he said. "More human." The words caught her off guard. She wasn't sure whether to be flattered or unsettled. She nodded once, keeping her voice even. "That's good to hear." Silence stretched between them. The hum of crickets filled the air, and for a moment, Claire felt the oddest thing. The awareness of him. It was wrong, she knew, a line she wouldn't cross. Still, she found herself saying softly, "Don't stay out here too late. Your father worries." Ryan gave her a half smile, then stood and shoved his hands in his pockets. "Good night, Officer Donovan." "Good night, Ryan." She watched him walk back toward the town square, his figure fading under the street lamps. A chill ran through her, not from the night air, but from something unspoken, something she couldn't yet name. By the time she slid into her cruiser, Claire told herself it was nothing. Just a boy, just a fleeting glance. Still, as she gripped the wheel and drove away, the echo of his words followed her into the dark, more human. She didn't know then how dangerous those words would become. For the next few weeks, Claire told herself it had been nothing, a harmless encounter in a parking lot. She buried it under her routine, morning patrols, paperwork, the long hours that defined her life. But denial only lasts so long in a town where every corner hides a familiar face. Ryan appeared again, this time inside the sheriff's office. Sheriff Hale had decided his son should learn responsibility by volunteering for the summer. The boy now delivered coffee, sorted files, and ran errands for the deputies. His presence was constant, a shadow Claire hadn't asked for. She tried not to notice him, but her eyes betrayed her. In the break room, he leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled to his elbows, laughing at a deputy's joke. For a moment his youth seemed suspended, replaced by something sharper, something almost adult. Claire forced herself to look away, busying her hands with a report. Just a boy, she reminded herself. Your colleague's son. Untouchable. And yet, when she passed him in the hallway, his eyes lingered too long. "Morning, Officer Donovan," Ryan said one day, his tone deliberately respectful. "Morning," she replied curtly, not slowing her pace. But his smirk followed her like a hook beneath the skin. That evening, the station grew quiet after sunset. Most deputies had gone home, and Claire was tasked with reviewing incident reports. The halls smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. She heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Ryan holding a stack of folders. "Dad asked me to file these," he said, walking closer. Claire took them from him quickly. "You shouldn't be hanging around here after hours." He tilted his head, studying her. "You always this serious?" "It's my job," she replied flatly. His grin softened. "I think you like being serious. But I also think sometimes you don't want to be." Her stomach tightened. She should have shut it down then, reminded him of boundaries, of consequences. Instead, she stood frozen, trapped in his gaze. The same look she'd tried to forget since that night at the fundraiser. "Go home, Ryan," she said at last, her voice firm but quieter than she intended. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I like talking to you." She stiffened. "This isn't appropriate." "Maybe," he said, a hint of defiance in his tone, "but it doesn't feel wrong." Before she could respond, Sheriff Hale's voice boomed from the lobby. "Ryan, let's go." The boy straightened instantly, slipping back into the role of obedient son. "Coming!" He gave Claire one last glance, sharp, knowing, before hurrying out. When the door closed, Claire exhaled shakily. Her reflection caught in the office window, the uniform, the badge, the image of discipline. But her chest ached with something she couldn't name, a pull she couldn't justify. "This ends here," she told herself. Yet as the night pressed in, she knew she was lying. Because the glance they shared wasn't harmless anymore. It was the start of something she couldn't control. And the next time they were alone, the line she swore she wouldn't cross would begin to blur. The line between professionalism and temptation had already blurred, though Claire refused to admit it. She told herself she could still control it, that discipline was stronger than desire. But temptation has a way of waiting for the right night, the right silence, the right storm. That night arrived in late July. Brookhaven was drenched in a sudden downpour, the kind of storm that turned streets into rivers and rattled the station windows. Calls flooded in, road closures, stranded cars, alarms set off by lightning. Claire had been assigned night patrol, and when one deputy called out sick, Sheriff Hale decided his son would ride along to learn real police work. Ryan. The idea unsettled her, but she didn't argue. She was trained to adapt, to swallow discomfort. Besides, how much trouble could come from a few hours together in a police cruiser? The storm roared as they drove along the county highway. Rain smeared the windshield, wipers thudding back and forth in a frantic rhythm. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Ryan's profile beside her. For the first 20 minutes they said nothing. Claire focused on the road, the radio chatter, the storm. But silence has a way of pressing in, filling the air with thoughts too loud to ignore. Ryan finally spoke. You don't like being alone with me, do you? Claire's grip tightened on the steering wheel. You're imagining things. No, he said calmly. You avoid looking at me, like you're afraid. I'm not afraid, she snapped, then softened her tone. But you're the sheriff's son. This isn't normal. Rain hammered the roof. Ryan leaned back, his voice lower now. Maybe normal isn't what either of us needs. Her chest tightened. She wanted to lecture him, remind him of boundaries, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she drove on, her pulse quickening with every glance he stole. Minutes later, a dispatch crackled too. Through the radio. Flooded roads ahead. Claire turned the cruiser down a side route, only to find the bridge washed out. They pulled over, water rushing too high to continue. Guess we're stuck, Ryan murmured, staring at the sheets of rain. Claire sighed, leaning back in her seat. We'll wait it out. The cruiser was small, the storm loud, the air thick with tension. Lightning flashed, and in its brief glow, Ryan's eyes found hers. Why do you fight it? He asked softly. Because it's wrong, she whispered. Feels right to me. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. Claire's breath trembled as Ryan leaned closer. She should have pushed him away. She should have reminded him of laws, of consequences, of the career she'd lose. But instead, her body betrayed her. When his lips brushed hers, she froze, guilt slamming through her. And yet, she didn't stop him. The kiss deepened, hungry and reckless, a dam breaking after weeks of restraint. Her hand pressed against his chest, not to push him away but to steady herself. Ryan, this can't... It already did, he whispered. Lightning flared again, illuminating their faces, close enough to erase the years between them. Claire pulled back, breathless, torn between terror and longing. She buried her face in her hands. God help me. Ryan touched her wrist gently. I don't need God. I need you. His words should have shattered the moment. Instead, they anchored it. Claire lowered her hands, her eyes meeting his again, and knew the choice had been made. When the rain finally eased, the cruiser felt like a different world. They said little on the drive back, but the silence was no longer empty. It was heavy, charged, sealed with something dangerous. Claire parked at the station, hands trembling on the wheel. She turned to him, her voice barely audible. No one can ever know. Ryan's lips curved into the faintest C. Mile. Our secret. He slipped out into the night, leaving Claire staring at her reflection in the rain-smeared windshield. She looked like a stranger, a woman who had crossed a line she could never uncross. And she knew someone would pay the price. Sheriff Tom Hale was a man who carried authority the way others carried weight, not as a burden, but as proof of strength. In Brookhaven, his name was synonymous with order. His handshake sealed deals, his words settled disputes, and his presence in a room was enough to quiet even the loudest voices. For 2 decades, Tom had built his reputation as a sheriff who kept the county safe. People respected him not just for the badge, but for the image he projected. A family man, a steady leader, a father who guided his only son with discipline and pride. Ryan was the heart of that image. At 17, Tom expected his boy to walk the straight path, to carry the family's honor. He had raised him on firm values, no excuses, no weakness, no shame. But lately, Tom had begun to sense cracks in that image, small fractures he couldn't ignore. It started with late nights. Ryan sneaking back into the house after curfew, the sound of the back door shutting softly, as though he thought his father wouldn't notice. Then came the distraction. At family dinners, Ryan picked at his food, his mind clearly elsewhere. He sat in his room for hours, phone in hand, typing furiously. The glow of the screen reflected in his eyes. Tom had lived too many years not to recognize secrets. He could smell them like rain on the horizon. One night, Tom stood outside his son's bedroom door, listening to the low murmur of Ryan's voice. It wasn't laughter with a friend, nor the sharp tone of a heated argument. It was something softer, more dangerous, intimate. He knocked, pushing the door open before Ryan could answer. Ryan jumped, clutching his phone. "Dad, I was just... Who are you talking to?" Tom's voice carried authority, not anger. "No one, just a friend." Tom studied his son, his face, the nervous flicker in his eyes, the way he angled the phone out of sight. Lies. He knew them well. "Be careful who you call a friend," Tom said, his gaze firm. "Some people don't belong in your life." Ryan swallowed hard, nodding. "I know." But Tom wasn't convinced. The sheriff's instincts sharpened as weeks passed. He caught Ryan slipping out of the house at midnight, whispering into his phone in the driveway. He saw the way his son's grades began to slip, the dark circles under his eyes, the restless energy that shadowed him. At the station, deputies whispered about how the boy seemed distracted even while helping with files. Tom brushed off their comments with a proud laugh, but inside, unease churned. Teenagers, he told himself. They go through phases. But Ryan wasn't just any teenager. He was his son. And Tom would not allow shame to stain the Hale name. One evening, as Tom polished his badge in the living room, his wife asked, "Is everything all right with Ryan? He seems different lately." Tom's jaw tightened. "I'll handle it." Handle it. That was his promise, to himself and to the town. He would find out what pulled his son away, what danger whispered into his nights. But in his certainty, Tom made a fatal mistake. He assumed the threat came from outside, from someone beyond his circle of trust. It never crossed his mind that Betrayal was sitting right beside him, in uniform, under his command, hiding behind a badge. And soon he would learn just how close that betrayal cut. Secrets have a way of growing bold when they survive the first brush with exposure. For Claire and Ryan, the stolen kiss in the cruiser should have been the end. A mistake locked away, forgotten before it consumed them. Instead, it became the spark that lit a fire neither of them could put out. What began as glances stretched into touches, and what began as touches soon demanded more. They met where they could, in the shadow of abandoned barns, in the hush of back roads, in the faded rooms of motels that smelled of cigarettes and cheap soap. Every encounter carried risk, every embrace a chance to be caught. But the danger was intoxicating, feeding the very hunger they should have feared. Claire told herself Ryan was different from other boys his age. He carried himself with confidence, with an intensity that reminded her of the men she once fell for, only unbroken, untouched by the cynicism of adulthood. "He understands me," she whispered to herself one night as she watched him sleep beside her, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. "He's not a child. He knows what this is." But underneath her justifications lurked a deeper truth. She was the adult, the one who knew better, the one who crossed a line she could never explain away. Still, every time doubt clawed at her, Ryan silenced it with the same reckless devotion. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows of her small home, Ryan leaned against the kitchen counter, his damp hair sticking to his forehead. He looked at her with the stubborn certainty of youth. "You worry too much," he said, voice low. "I have to," Claire replied, pacing the room. "If anyone finds out, no one will. I won't let them." She stopped, staring at him. "You can't control this, Ryan." He stepped closer, brushing his hand against hers. "I can control us." His words, naive yet fierce, disarmed her. Against her better judgment, she believed him. or wanted to. But the secrecy demanded more than silence. It demanded lies. Claire began sneaking out of shifts early, fabricating errands, avoiding fellow officers' eyes. She told herself that deception was temporary, that one day she would step back before it destroyed her. But the deeper she fell, the less willing she was to imagine life without him. Ryan, meanwhile, became consumed. His text messages lit up her phone at all hours. "Where are you? When can I see you?" His obsession was both thrilling and suffocating. Once, when she suggested they slow down, his face darkened. "You're not pulling away from me," he said sharply. Her pulse quickened. "It's not about that. It's about protecting you. Protecting us." "You think I can't handle this?" His eyes flashed with hurt. "I'm not some kid, Claire. You need me as much as I need you." The anger in his voice unsettled her, but beneath it was desperation. A desperation she couldn't ignore. So she softened, reaching for him, whispering, "I know. I can't lose this." And with that, her fear melted back into desire. As weeks turned into months, their affair darkened. Claire noticed how Ryan grew restless when they weren't together, how he snapped at friends, how he grew distant from his family. He poured all of himself into her, a devotion that was intoxicating but heavy, dangerous. There were nights when Claire lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the reality of what they were doing. The badge on her nightstand seemed to glare at her, a reminder of everything she stood to lose. And yet, she would turn her head, see Ryan sleeping beside her, and tell herself one more lie. This is worth it. But even in the secrecy of her home, the walls seemed thinner, the shadows less forgiving. Neighbors noticed her lights burning late, a car parked in her driveway at odd hours. And at the Statiers. On. Detective Marler's eyes lingered too long when Claire returned from unexplained absences. The affair, once hidden in shadows, was now bleeding into daylight. Claire tried to bury the unease, convincing herself that love, or what felt like love, could survive anything. But a part of her knew the truth. Every stolen night, every whispered promise, every risk they took was another step closer to ruin. She had crossed the line. Now she was running deeper into darkness with no way back. And as suspicion quietly stirred in those around her, the whispers she feared were already beginning. Detective Marler had been on the force for nearly 15 years. She was the kind of woman who noticed the small things, the extra coffee cup left in the trash, the sudden flush on Claire's cheeks when someone mentioned her evening shifts, the way her eyes darted away from direct questions. Claire had always been sharp, dependable, unshakable under pressure. But lately, something had changed. She disappeared for stretches of time, returned with excuses that felt rehearsed, and carried a nervous energy that wasn't easy to miss. "Claire," Marler said one evening as they crossed paths in the station's back hall, "you've been running yourself ragged. Everything all right?" Claire forced a smile, but it didn't touch her eyes. "Just tired. Too many late shifts." Marler tilted her head. She'd heard that excuse before, from officers hiding drinking habits, debts, or worse. Well, you know, if you ever need to talk." She let the offer hang, her tone casual but probing. Claire laughed lightly, too lightly. "Appreciate it, really. I'm fine." And she walked away quickly, as if distance could dissolve suspicion. But Marler wasn't convinced. Meanwhile, Ryan's life was becoming just as complicated. He had grown reckless with the thrill of secrecy, addicted to the adrenaline of sneaking around with a woman who should have been untouchable. At school he scrolled through messages when he thought no one was watching, Claire's words glowing like fire on his phone screen. One afternoon his best friend Tyler caught a glimpse. They were sitting in the cafeteria, Ryan grinning at a text. Tyler leaned over. "Who's got you smiling like that?" Ryan quickly turned the phone face down, but not before a single word flashed across the screen. Claire. Tyler frowned. Claire, who's that? Don't tell me it's some older chick. He laughed, but the unease in his tone lingered. Ryan shifted, defensive. Just someone I know. Drop it. But Tyler couldn't shake what he'd seen. Ryan never acted cagey unless he had something to hide. And the name, it tugged at him. Because wasn't Claire the name of one of the cops who worked with Ryan's dad? The thought simmered, unspoken but dangerous. For Claire, the cracks in their secret world were beginning to show. After leaving a motel one evening, she sat alone in her car, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She told herself Ryan was different, that he wasn't just a boy, but someone who understood her, someone who made her feel alive again. But the doubts never fully went away. Each stolen moment was another coin tossed into a well of risk, and the well was filling fast. Claire, Ryan said one night, as they lay in the dim glow of a cabin lantern, I'm tired of hiding. I don't want to sneak around anymore. I want to be with you. For real. Her chest tightened. Ryan, you don't understand. If people find out, it won't just ruin me. It could ruin you too. I don't care, he snapped, frustration cutting through the room. I'm not a kid. I want more than scraps of your time. His words echoed against the cabin walls. For the first time, Claire saw not just devotion, but hunger. The kind that could turn dangerous if left unchecked. Back at the station, Marla watched Claire leave again after clocking out early. She scribbled a note in her desk pad. Where is she going every night? Gut? Suspicion was no longer a quiet whisper. It was becoming a steady hum in the dark, pressing her closer to the truth. And in Ryan's circle, Tyler's unease grew into curiosity, then into silent alarm. He didn't yet know the whole story, but he had seen enough to sense a storm brewing. Claire could feel it too. The walls of secrecy were thinning, whispers curling through the cracks. She tried to ignore them, but deep down she knew every secret has a lifespan. And theirs was running out. The storm had been brewing for weeks, but Claire told herself it was just a phase. The thrill was wearing thin, and Ryan would eventually settle down. Yet the truth pressed in around her. Their stolen nights had shifted from intoxicating escapes to suffocating traps. Ryan was changing. One evening, in the seclusion of the cabin where they thought the world couldn't touch them, Ryan stood pacing while Claire sat stiffly on the worn couch, his fists clenched and unclenched, his voice thick with something heavier than frustration. I love you, he blurted, almost angrily. His chest rose and fell, as if he had been holding it back for too long. Do you hear me, Claire? I love you. I don't care about the rules or what people say. I want you. Only you. Claire froze, her throat dry. A part of her had always known this moment would come, that the boy who made her feel wanted would eventually want more than she could ever give. Ryan, she whispered carefully, you don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. His voice cracked, not from immaturity but from desperation. I'm not just some kid sneaking around anymore. I want you to leave all this. The uniform, the lies, the pretending. Be with me, for real. Run away if we have to. The words were a knife, sharp and reckless. Claire's pulse quickened as panic set in. She had built a fragile balance, convincing herself this was control, this was choice. But Ryan's eyes burned with the wildness of someone ready to shatter the balance entirely. Ryan, listen to me, she said, her tone firm now, as though she could command him like she commanded suspects. This, what we have, it's dangerous. If anyone finds out, I lose everything. My career, my reputation, my freedom. And you. She stopped, realizing the truth she had been skirting around. You could lose your future. Ryan's jaw tightened. He turned away, his hands digging into his hair as if he could claw the tension out. You think I care about school? About my future. You're my future, Claire. Don't you get it? Her heart squeezed painfully. He wasn't just smitten. He was drowning. And she had been the one to push him into the water. Their secret meetings began to twist with new shadows. Gone were the playful touches, the stolen laughter. Now there were sharp words, restless silences, and a constant undercurrent of fear. "You didn't answer my text," Ryan accused one night, his voice brittle with suspicion. Claire sighed, exhaustion etched into her face. "I was on shift, Ryan. I can't just drop everything every time you want me." He glared. "So there's someone else, isn't there? Some guy at the station? Tell me the truth." Claire's breath caught. The jealousy in his eyes was raw, unrelenting. "Ryan, stop. Don't do this. You're imagining things." But the damage was done. Doubt had seeped into him like poison, turning the once thrilling bond into a battlefield. The unraveling was subtle but steady. Ryan showed up unannounced at her doorstep one night, rain dripping from his hair, demanding to be let in. He pressed against her, not with lust but with need, a consuming hunger that left Claire shaken. "This isn't love, Ryan," she whispered as he clung to her. "This is obsession." He pulled back, his face twisted with anguish. "Obsession? You think that's all this is? You made me this way. You can't just walk away now." His words pierced her. For the first time, Claire realized the affair wasn't just reckless anymore. It was dangerous. Back at the station, Detective Marler's eyes lingered longer on Claire, suspicion sharpening like a knife, and at home, Sheriff Tom Hale noticed his son slipping further into secrecy, anger sparking where there used to be ease. Claire could feel the noose tightening. What had once been whispers in the dark was now becoming louder, harder to ignore. Ryan's declaration, his desperation, his unraveling. It was the breaking point she had dreaded. And she knew the next crack in their fragile world wouldn't just wound them. It could destroy everything. The breaking point was not only between Claire and Ryan. It had begun to seep into Sheriff Tom Hale's world too, cracking the foundation of the life he thought he controlled. Tom Hale was not a man easily fooled. He had built his reputation on vigilance, noticing the tremor in a suspect's hand, the hesitation in a liar's voice, the faintest detail most people overlooked. But when it came to his son, he had always allowed himself a blind spot. That blind spot was narrowing now. One night, just past midnight, Tom sat in his armchair, the glow of the muted television flickering across his face. He heard it again, the squeak of the back door, the soft pad of footsteps slipping out into the dark. His jaw tightened. "Ryan." He waited a few minutes, then rose silently, pulling on his jacket. He slipped out, moving with the same stealth he had used on countless surveillance nights. His son's car was parked 2 streets over. Tom's chest tightened with dread as he followed it at a distance. Headlights off, every mile sharpening his suspicion. Ryan drove like a boy who thought the world was asleep, unaware of the predator following behind. Finally, he pulled into a quiet side road, where a lone car waited, its interior lit by the faint glow of a phone screen. Tom's breath caught when he saw her. Claire. Her silhouette was unmistakable, the short, neat haircut, the uniform jacket folded on the seat beside her. A colleague, a woman he trusted, Dee, and his son, sliding into her passenger seat with a familiarity that turned Tom's blood cold. For a long moment, Tom sat in the shadows, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. His mind reeled, disbelief giving way to fury, betrayal knotting in his gut. Claire, a sworn officer under his command, entangled with his 17-year-old son. The betrayal cut twice, once as a father, once as a sheriff. Through the windshield, Tom watched Ryan lean toward her, their heads close, Claire's hand brushing his shoulder. The intimacy of it made Tom's stomach turn. He had seen enough. He wanted to storm out, rip the door open, drag his son home by the collar. But something heavier pinned him in place. Shame. The weight of what this would mean if the town knew, if the department knew. The scandal would shatter his family, stain his badge, and destroy everything he had built. Instead, he sat trembling with rage, his breathing harsh. "How could you, Claire?" he muttered under his breath. "How could you do this to me?" To him. Back in Claire's car, Ryan laughed softly, touching her hand. "See? No one knows. No one ever will." But Claire didn't laugh. Her nerves were raw, her eyes flicking nervously toward the road. "We're taking too many risks, Ryan. Someone's going to see us." Unbeknownst to her, someone already had. Tom drove home that night in silence, every thought burning like acid. He replayed the image of his son sitting beside her, their shoulders brushing, the kind of closeness that could never be explained away. By the time he returned, the sheriff inside him was already warring with the father. The law said Claire's betrayal was criminal. The father in him demanded vengeance. Sleep never came. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at the badge in his hand. One thing was certain. There would be no more hiding. The next time Ryan Selung ipped out, Tom would not just follow, he would confront. And when he did, the truth would explode into violence. Sheriff Tom Hale was a man of restraint, a man who carried his anger like a locked weapon, always hidden, always under control. But that night, control was no longer possible. The image of his son in Claire's car had haunted him all day. Every time he tried to focus on paperwork, the memory crept back, her hand on Ryan's shoulder, the way Ryan looked at her with devotion. It was an image of betrayal, seared into him. Betrayal by his son, betrayal by the officer he trusted. By midnight, when Ryan slipped quietly out again, Tom followed. His hands gripped the wheel with white-knuckled force, his face rigid, his chest heaving with a storm he could no longer contain. This time, Ryan didn't drive to a cabin or a motel. He went straight to Claire's small house on the edge of town. Tom parked down the street, his breath clouding in the cold air as he approached on foot. The house lights were low, curtains drawn, but he could hear faint laughter inside. His son's laughter. Her laughter. That was all it took. Tom stormed up the steps and pounded on the door with a fist that rattled the frame. Inside, Claire jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. Ryan's face went pale. "Dad," he whispered, panic in his eyes. "Don't answer," Claire hissed. "He can't know." But the pounding grew louder, harder. A voice thundered through the wood. "Open this door, Claire! Now!" Claire's hands trembled. She knew she couldn't ignore him. She unlocked the door, just enough to crack it open. Tom shoved it wide, barging in with the force of an avalanche. His eyes swept the room, landing on Ryan, his son. Here, in her house. "You!" he growled, pointing a shaking finger at Claire. "How dare you? How dare you touch my boy?" "Dad!" Ryan stepped forward, but Tom's rage swallowed the room. "She's a predator," he bellowed. "A disgrace to that badge. You seduced him, used him. You think I wouldn't find out?" Claire's voice cracked as she tried to explain, though no excuse could save her. "Tom, please, this wasn't what you think. I care about him. He's not a child." "Not a child?" Tom roared. "He's 17. He's my son." His face turned red, his chest heaving with betrayal and fury. "You disgust me." "Stop it!" Ryan shouted, stepping between them. His voice trembled, but his body was firm. "I love her, Dad. You don't understand. She didn't force me. This is my choice." Tom stared at his son, stunned into silence for a moment. Then his expression hardened into something darker, colder. "You've lost your mind, boy. She poisoned you." No, Ryan snapped. You're wrong. She's the only one who sees me for who I am. Not your little soldier, not your perfect son. She loves me? The words were gasoline. Tom exploded. With a guttural yell, he lunged at Claire, his hands reaching for her throat. She stumbled back, hitting the wall, gasping as his weight bore down. "Dad, stop!" Ryan screamed, shoving against him. But Tom was stronger. Years of fury and discipline channeled into his grip. Claire's eyes bulged with panic as she clawed at his wrists. In the chaos, Ryan's eyes landed on the holster at his father's side. His father's gun. Something inside Ryan snapped. He lunged, yanking the weapon free with desperate hands. "Let her go!" he shouted, aiming the gun with shaking arms. Tom froze, his breath hot, his eyes wide as he turned toward his son. "Ryan," he said, voice low, almost pleading. "Put that down. You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing." Ryan's voice cracked with terror and rage. "You're hurting her. You'll kill her." For a single suspended moment, the room was nothing but pounding hearts and the cold gleam of steel. Then the gun went off. The sound was deafening, echoing through the small house like thunder. Tom staggered back. Kirk, his eyes wide with shock. Blood blossomed across his chest, dark and spreading. He swayed once, then collapsed onto the floorboards with a heavy thud. "Dad!" Ryan screamed, dropping the gun, rushing to his side. His hands pressed against the wound, but blood poured through his fingers. "No, no, no. Stay with me, please." Claire stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth, her body trembling violently. She had wanted to stop the fight, to calm the storm. But the storm had claimed its first victim. Tom's breaths grew shallow, his eyes glassy. He looked at his son, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. A final shudder rippled through him. Then nothing. The sheriff was gone. Blood pooled on the floor, glistening under the dim light. The house, once a refuge of secrecy, now felt like a crime scene drenched in silence. Ryan sat cradling his father, his sobs breaking the stillness. Claire backed into the corner, her legs giving way beneath her. The reality pressed in like suffocating walls. Their secret had ended in blood, and now there was no going back. The gunshot still echoed in Claire's ears long after the silence swallowed the house. Sheriff Tom Hale lay motionless on the floor, blood spreading in a dark halo beneath him. The smell of iron filled the air, heavy and suffocating. Ryan's sobs broke through the stillness, ragged and desperate. "Dad? Oh God, Dad!" His hands pressed against the wound, though both of them knew it was useless. Tom was gone. Claire's body shook violently. Her hands, her uniform, even the floor beneath her seemed stained with guilt. She pressed her back to the wall, fighting for breath. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was murder. Ryan looked up at her, his eyes wild and glassy. "What do we do? Claire, what do we do?" For a moment, she couldn't answer. Her mind raced through every possibility, every nightmare. Prison, headlines, disgrace. Then, with a steadiness she didn't feel, she whispered, "We make it look like something else. A break-in. A robbery gone wrong, Rye," and shook his head in disbelief. "No one will believe that." "They have to," Claire snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. She softened, reaching for his trembling hands. "Ryan, listen to me. If they find out the truth, it won't just be me who loses everything. It'll be you, too. You'll go to prison. Do you understand? You'll lose your whole life." His chest heaved, torn between fear and obedience. Finally, he nodded. Okay. What do we do?" The cover-up began. Claire wiped surfaces, rearranged furniture, and shattered a lamp to make it look like a struggle. She guided Ryan like a commander in battle, masking her own terror behind urgency. They dragged Tom's body closer to the door, as though he had fought an intruder on his way in. Claire left the back door ajar, the lock forced with a hammer. Every move felt mechanical, rehearsed in the split-second panic of survival. But no matter how carefully they staged the scene, nothing could hide the raw truth written on their faces. Ryan's eyes were swollen from tears, his hands still shaking. Claire's breath came in shallow bursts, her lips pressed tight as though holding back a scream. When it was done, they stood over Tom's body, the silence deafening once again. Claire forced Ryan to meet her eyes. "From now on, we don't waver. Do you hear me? We tell the story, we stick to it, and we don't let anyone see through us." Ryan swallowed hard, but there was no conviction in his nod. The investigation was swift. The town's sheriff murdered in his own home. It was the kind of tragedy that shook an entire community. Officers crowded the scene, their voices low and urgent, their faces grim. Detective Marla was among the first to arrive. She scanned the room with sharp eyes, cataloguing every detail. The broken lamp, the forced door, the overturned chair. On the surface, it spoke of intrusion. But something in the Aisha felt wrong. Her gaze shifted to Claire, who stood pale and shaken, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. "You found him?" Marla asked softly. Claire nodded, her voice cracking, as she repeated the story she and Ryan had rehearsed. A noise at the door, a struggle, a gunshot. The intruder fled. Marla listened, but her instincts prickled. The story was too neat, too controlled. And then there was Ryan. He stood nearby, his arms wrapped tightly around himself, eyes red and distant. When Marla asked him questions, his answers stumbled, his voice betraying the weight he carried. She didn't press, not yet. But the seed of doubt was already planted. In the days that followed, guilt chewed at Ryan like a relentless parasite. He replayed the moment over and over, his father's face, the blood, the gun in his own hands. At night, he woke in cold sweats, hearing the echo of the gunshot in his dreams. Claire tried to soothe him, whispering that they were safe, that no one would ever know. But her words couldn't silence the truth gnawing at him. He was drowning in guilt, and every attempt she made to hold him afloat only pushed him further under. Marla's eyes lingered on him each time they crossed paths. She saw the cracks, the faltering mask. She knew something wasn't right, and it was only a matter of time before the silence shattered. Ryan sat under the buzzing fluorescent light of the interrogation room, his hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white, sweat beading at his temples. He had been brought in for questioning after hours of silence following the staged break-in. The weight of the night's horror pressed down on him, heavier than the chair he sat in. His father was gone, and the image of the sheriff's body sprawled across Claire's floor, replayed endlessly in his mind. Detective Marla leaned across the table, her gaze sharp, unwavering. She had known Ryan since he was a boy, had shared dinners at the Hale family home, and now she watched him unravel before her. "Ryan," she said softly but firmly, "something isn't adding up. The story about the break-in doesn't match the evidence. You need to tell me the truth." Her words sliced through him. His throat tightened, and his stomach churned. He wanted desperately to protect Claire, to hold on to the illusion that what they shared was worth every secret, every risk. But with each beat of silence, his guilt clawed higher, scraping at his resolve. I don't know what you want me to say," Ryan stammered, his voice cracking. His eyes darted toward the door, as if escape might release him from this crushing reality. Marla leaned back, folding her arms. "I think you do know. Your father was a good man. He didn't deserve this. If you keep hiding the truth, Ryan, it's only going to destroy you further." Her words pierced deeper because they were true. The sheriff had been stern, proud, unyielding, but he had been Ryan's father. And Ryan had pulled the trigger. The memory of the gun in his trembling hands seared into him, the sound of the shot echoing in his ears. Tears welled up, spilling down his cheeks as his chest heaved. "I didn't mean to," he whispered, his voice raw. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." Marla's eyes sharpened. "What happened, Ryan? Tell me." The dam inside him cracked. His sobs filled the room, choked and desperate. "It was Claire," he confessed. We were together. She told me not to say anything, but we were in love. My dad found out. He came after her, after us. He was yelling, and I just wanted him to stop. He went for her, and I grabbed his gun. I didn't think. I pulled the trigger." The words spilled faster now, unstoppable, the truth tumbling free after weeks of secrecy. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. She said everything would be fine. She said no one would find out." Marla's face hardened, though sorrow flickered in her eyes. She knew now the betrayal ran deeper than PR, professional misconduct. One of her fellow officers, Claire, had entangled herself with a boy who had now killed his own father. The door opened, and 2 uniformed deputies entered. They had been listening outside, waiting for the moment the confession came. Ryan shrank into his chair as the cuffs closed around his wrists. He felt the cold bite of metal, the finality of it sinking in. Meanwhile, across town, Claire was pulled from her home in handcuffs of her own. Her face, usually composed, was pale and trembling. The neighbours gathered outside, whispering as the woman they had trusted in uniform was led into the back of a squad car. In that moment, her facade shattered. She no longer looked like the confident officer or the woman who whispered promises in the dark. She looked small, exposed, her secrets bleeding into the night air. Ryan watched from the station window as they drove her away, their eyes meeting for the briefest second. The bond that had once thrilled them both now lay poisoned, fragile and broken beneath the harsh light of truth. The affair was no longer hidden. It was evidence. And the silence that once bound them had collapsed into confession. The courtroom was silent, except for the steady scratch of the stenographer's keys and the occasional shifting of bodies in the pews. The trial had dragged on for weeks. Every sordid detail of Claire and Ryan's affair laid bare under oath. What had once been a secret held in shadows was now dissected under fluorescent lights and the judgmental eyes of the community. Each witness, each piece of evidence, chipped away at what remained of their dignity. Ryan sat hunched at the defense table, his once boyish face gaunt and hollowed by sleepless nights. He had confessed, and though his age spared him the harshest sentence, the weight of what he had done left a permanent scar. The prosecutor painted him as a troubled teen, manipulated by a woman who should have known better. Claire's attorney argued she had not forced him, that Ryan acted of his own accord. But the damage was undeniable. Yes, he sat rigid beside her lawyer, her hands clasped in her lap. She wore the plain suit they had chosen to make her look professional, stable, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted nervously each time Ryan's name was spoken, each time the word affair hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. She remembered their stolen moments, motel rooms, late-night whispers, promises that blurred the lines between fantasy and reality. But now those same memories were ammunition against her, twisted into a narrative of predation and betrayal. The jury returned after hours of deliberation. The foreman, a man with lined features and tired eyes, rose and delivered the verdict. Guilty. The word echoed like a gavel strike inside Claire's chest. Guilty of misconduct? Guilty of endangering a minor? Guilty of concealing the events that led to the sheriff's death? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Claire's composure broke. Her lips trembled, though no sound came. She turned her head slightly, searching for Ryan. But he wouldn't meet her gaze. He stared at the table, his fingers picking at the wood grain, as if avoiding her eyes could erase what they had shared. The sentence came swiftly. Years in prison. The judge's voice was firm, his tone carrying both authority and disappointment. "You were trusted to uphold the law," he said. "Instead, you broke it in the most devastating way." Ryan's punishment was lighter, though no less life-altering. Juvenile detention, mandatory counseling, and the unshakable reality that he had killed his father. His youth saved him from the full weight of the law, but it could not save him from the guilt that gnawed at his soul. As deputies escorted Claire from the courtroom, whispers filled the benches. Once respected, now reviled, she walked with her head lowered, her hands cuffed in front of her. Outside, news cameras flashed, capturing her descent from officer to inmate. The community that had once looked at her with admiration now regarded her with contempt. Days turned to weeks, and eventually Claire found herself in a grey prison uniform, the clang of steel doors closing behind her. The walls smelled faintly of bleach and despair. Her cell was small, barren, with only a cot, a toilet, and a small window too high to reach. She sat on the cot, her shoulders slumped, the weight of years pressing forward in her mind. At night she heard the sounds of the prison, distant footsteps, muffled cries, the metallic rattle of keys. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by memories of Ryan's smile, of Sheriff Hale's furious eyes, of the gunshot that ended everything. She replayed it endlessly, trying to convince herself she hadn't caused it, that she hadn't led him down that path. But the truth was merciless. She had planted the seeds, and the harvest had been blood. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she pulled from her belongings a single photograph. It was of her in uniform, taken years earlier, standing proudly beside her patrol car. Her smile was bright, her eyes confident, her badge gleaming. She traced the edges of the photo with her fingers, her throat tightening. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone she had killed long before the sheriff ever hit the floor. She held the picture close, whispering into the stillness. "What have I done?" The walls did not answer. Somewhere beyond those bars, Ryan struggled with his own demons, his life marked by a tragedy too heavy for his youth. Both bound by secrets, both scarred by choices that could never be undone. They lived in separate cages, one of steel, the other of guilt. And as Claire stared at the photograph, her past self looking back with pride she could no longer claim, she understood the true cost of secrets. Everything.